With an MP3 trailer in our hot little hands, it's now time to actually make that available to the internet. So, for the penultimate time, properly produced podcast episodes are recorded to storage, mixed so that everyone's voices are level, edited to remove boring bits or mistakes, exported as a 64 kilobit or 128 kilobit per second MP3 file, and then uploaded to a media host. And also given an enticing title and description, both of which we will cover here. So the first thing you want to make sure you've done is to set up your podcast in your media host. There's a homework item for you to choose a media host if you haven't already, but if you need to revisit the hosting section, you can do that. But this is the point now where you will want to think about signing up for a free trial for one of those services. Once you're in and you've set up your podcast, you've gone through the various steps to set up your show, you can then create a new episode. Pick a clickable title for that episode, something that is enticing. Write your show notes, and then you're ready to go with your episode uploaded, and you can hit publish. So we'll go through all of these steps in detail, beginning with the episode title. If you've got guests, you can consider including the guest's name in your title. They get cut off, though, somewhere between 60 and 80 characters, depending on the app or on the web as well. So you don't want something that's too long. Now, on the web, of course, we can have a slightly different title or a completely different title for our episode. So if you're targeting search engines and you're hoping that your audio will be discovered via Google search rather than people typing stuff into their podcast app, then you can, if you're using either an integrated service like Captivate, you can set a different SEO title, if you like, for your episode webpage. If you're doing it on WordPress or Ghost, then you're creating your own webpage manually anyway, so of course you can do that there. And so it could be a more optimized title than you might have for the actual episode itself as it appears in a podcast player. Things not to include: the name of your podcast, an episode number, or the date. Those pieces of information are already available elsewhere in the listening app, so they don't need to be added. And in some cases, Apple will look sternly upon you if you include that kind of metadata in your title. Really, you just want to focus on what is something that is going to make the listener interested in this episode. Now, we'll cover that kind of stuff more in the growth course that we have available as well. But those are some basic rules of thumb. Some good show note or some good episode title examples include Being on the Hook with Seth Godin, because that's relating to one of his books. Embrace a Just Cause with Simon Sinek. Dressing in Disguise, Evasions, Escapes, and Emancipation. Here's some, in my opinion, not so good examples. The Adventure Zone Ethersea, episode 36. One of the reasons there is that if you're looking at a bunch of Adventure Zone episodes, it's a D&D comedy podcast. I mean, we've got none of that is actually usable information. Ethersea is the name of the series, or the season, if you like, and then the episode number sort of tells me nothing. Real Talk David Anderson, and then a date. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about a podcast being called Real Talk. All of that is unneeded, unnecessary, apart from obviously the guest name. But guest name aside, there's nothing there that we can actually make any use of. And then this one, I mean, that's just a whole mess, right? That's a real episode title that someone did on a real podcast. And I'm, the podcast is great, and obviously the person that they're interviewing is a highly accomplished individual. But that's just soup. That's just keyword stuffing and unreadable and too long. Now, let's look at your episode description, sometimes called show notes. It's basically the same thing. This is where you are going to contextualize your episode for new listeners. It's also a place that you can add value as they're listening. You can enhance their experience. You can establish, right from the beginning, you can establish tension that your episode is then going to release. So you do that then in a follow-up sentence. So your first sentence might be something, doesn't have to be controversial or scaremongering or even clickbaity, but just something that sets up a bit of tension or intrigue. Remember, tension doesn't have to be negative. It can be something that is intriguing. Do that in your first sentence, and then in your second sentence, you can explain how the episode is going to resolve that tension. So that then we've got that nice ebb and flow, and we know, oh, okay, like this, there is an answer to this, or this mystery is going to be, if not completely revealed, at least explored. Then you can add some background, and you usually do that in a second paragraph, because writing for the web, you only want to stick to like a sentence or two per paragraph, because reading on small screens, especially, text can look very daunting very quickly. So we want to have sort of we want some breathing space around it. So next paragraph, then you can go into a bit of background. If you've got a guest, explain what the guest is bringing, what knowledge, how are they supporting this tension and resolve? Like, how are they the person that resolves that tension? And then just list links to things that you've discussed in your episode and put them in chronological order. So if you have a guest and you've talked about a bunch of books or a TED Talk or a YouTube video, just link to each one of them in order so that the listener can follow through that they might not be clicking them in real time, but it means that once they're finished, or they can hit pause partway through the episode, and then they can check that stuff out, and they know easily where to find it because it's in a nice, simple chronological order. If you want to link to guest stuff, if they've got books or whatever else that they're going to plug, do that up top, because that's where you've introduced the guest. If you've got calls to action, depending on how important they are, you might put them at the bottom. If they're super important to you, then maybe put them before your actual links section. If you've got a program that you're running and you want people to come and join it, maybe do that higher up in the episode description. Next, let's have a look at transcripts. But I hear you possibly asking, podcasts are exclusively audio, right? So why do we need to cater for an audience when we have a medium that is exclusively audio? Well, if that is what you might be thinking, that might be because you're thinking about people who absolutely cannot hear the episode for whatever reason, and that just isn't the case. There is hearing loss, hearing difference is a vast spectrum, and it's not simply just about how loud or quiet something is. It's not just about serving people who are profoundly deaf or who are indeed deaf at all. It might be to do with people having different ways of processing audio, processing speech. It might be that you can help people if you've got a guest with an accent that might be unfamiliar to your listening audience. It's great for being able to review things that were said really quickly. So we're not just now talking about accessibility needs. That is one of the primary reasons to have a transcript, is to make your episodes available to those. I mean, we've talked about unfamiliar accents. There's also things like crosstalk. For some, audio processing, when there's crosstalk, two people talking at the same time, it's much harder for them to figure out what's being said. And so a transcript can help with that to a degree. It's increasingly going to become more and more mandatory across the board, as well it should. Larger organizations have already faced legal ramifications of failing to provide accessible ways of their content being disseminated or consumed in some way. Yes, the primary means of this bit of communication is audio, but just in the same way that people might turn on subtitles or turn on audio description in a TV show, they might do that and be sighted, but they might not have complete sight, or they might just be in a different sort of environment. And so these kind of things are useful for us to think about, and it's a great bonus that we can use something like Descript for our editing because we also get the transcript thrown in. There are also SEO benefits. I don't want that to be the reason that you do this. I'd rather it be because it is the right thing to do to serve the audiences that will make use of this, and also to make your episode a little bit more easily scannable. But there are also SEO benefits because the more that search engines and computers understand about what's being said, the more they can file it away and categorize it and then surface it to people. So there is a great benefit to be able to link to your transcript or just have it as an ancillary web page. So the way I work is that I have show notes for each episode of my podcasts, and then there's a link to the transcript, which just goes off to like a sub page, which just has the transcript text. And so it can just be read quite easily there and also gobbled up by Google. So as I said, Descript. Otter is also another option. If you're not editing your audio using Descript, you can transcribe it in a service like Otter as well. Otter's a bit trickier when it comes to editing. It's not quite so smooth an experience, but it will definitely give you that transcript, and they are much more generous in the amount of time that they'll give you, if you like, transcription minutes. Whereas Descript tends to be a little bit more stingy, but it is a higher quality product when it comes to the editing. Next up, let's have a look at something called ID3 tags. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, but it's useful to know. So MP3 files have metadata tags attached to them. In the same way that your photos, your JPEGs that are taken from your phone, they have metadata in them about when they were taken, the lens that was used, the camera that was used, the location that they were taken. That's all stored in the MP3, in the metadata of your images. MP3 files have a similar thing, and it's called ID3. And it was used back in the day. It was when it was more important that, for people who had large music libraries, because MP3s primarily is a music format. When people had large music libraries, they wanted to be able to catalog and search and filter and organize. And doing that through the file system was pretty tricky. There's only so much you can do by going into your Finder or the File Explorer. So ID3 data, putting that information in, being able to read it from the MP3 file is super useful. So you can then add information about the artist and the track name and even lyrics. In podcast form, it can include the podcast title, the show name, the episode title, and it can also include artwork as well. And that's pretty much all the ID3 tags are used for nowadays. So there are lots of different ways that you can handle artwork for your episode. So your episode of your podcast can have unique artwork per episode. So if you've got a guest on, you might incorporate a photo of the guest in the artwork for the episode. And that's great when you visit the website of your podcast and you can see a list of all your episodes. Each one's got a nice image that's different per episode, and then that can show up in your episode player. The best way to make sure it will appear in all episodes, all episode players, is to bake that image into your MP3 file and also upload it to your media host as well. Some apps want the image file to be baked into the MP3 file in one of these ID3 tags, which you can do in Descript, and you can also do in external applications if you're not using Descript. And also, you want to upload it to your media host because other apps take it from your feed. If you remember, we talked about the RSS feed. That's got information about where your MP3 file lives. It's also got information like your title, and that's where your show notes live as well. In that RSS feed, for each episode, there can also be a link to the image that goes along with that episode. And so if you upload specific artwork to your media host, then it will be in the feed, and then having it in both places means that it will be available in pretty much all apps that support per episode artwork. And if you don't have specific artwork for an episode, the app will show your overall podcast artwork. Now, some hosts will do that MP3 baking in for you, but there's only a small handful of Libsyn will do it. There's a few others that will as well. Fireside, I think, will absolutely do it. So consult the information or the help literature for your podcast host, because they may actually do that bit for you and take the MP3 file, take the audio file, take the image file, and smush them together for you. And then, like I said, some audio editing apps will do this. Descript will do it. Audacity, I don't think will. It will allow you to set the text-based metadata, but you might need to use another application in order to drag the drag the image file into the MP3 file. And like I said, it's only on a per episode basis, so you don't need to do this if you're not changing the artwork per episode. Because if you're not, then your podcast player and your website will use the overall podcast artwork. So you don't need to do this for every episode that you have. There are other considerations about artwork and file sizes and all sorts of things that we can go into in more detail in other segments, but it's not for this course. When you upload audio to your media host, you can decide whether you want to publish it now or schedule it for a specific time. And when that happens, your media host will then update your RSS feed at that specific time. So no one will know about the episode until it's ready. So it can be a really handy way. Then you can batch edit a bunch of episodes and you can get them all uploaded, and then they can be trickled out over time. Or you might upload the night before and then let it publish the next morning. It's also perfectly fine to just upload and publish at the time that you've uploaded it. It all depends on whether you want to stick to a particular cadence, and if you've said I'm always going to deliver episodes on Tuesday mornings, then if you've been editing on Saturday night, then you can schedule it for Tuesday mornings. You can also, in most hosts, once you have uploaded your episode, you don't necessarily have to have hit publish, but you may get a URL, a link that you can share that episode with guests or co-hosts. So this might not be the publicly available web page for your subscribers and your followers and all those kinds of people. It might be that, for example, in Transistor and in Captivate and in Libsyn, you get access to a page that has the episode player and it has the show notes. It won't have all of your branding, and it's not, as we discussed before, land you own. It's just a way of you being able to preview the episode and to share it with people who need to hear it before it goes live. So it's a useful thing to be aware of, because if you're collaborating with people and you want to share the episode with them a few days before it goes live, then that's a great way of being able to do that as well. So, some homework then. If you haven't already, pick a media host. Pick someone who's going to host your RSS feed and your audio. Consider whether they are going to be the same people that will host your website as well. But for now, focus on that media host. Get signed up, go through their 7-day trial, and set up your podcast with them. And then take that MP3 trailer file and upload it as a first episode. Then publish it and view the finished web page that is generated. That will either be that temporary sharing URL that I just talked about, or it might be a fully made up web page that is available. Depends on your host, but get something that you can then view on the web and see if you can pass it along to a friend and see if they can see the episode and play it as well. Once all that's done, stuff is about to get real, because in the next lesson, we are going to submit our podcast feed to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere podcasts are found.